gotta do better than that.
I am fascinated by bad video games. So, over the years, I've read a lot of worst of lists, and Turning Point Fall of Liberty always seems to show up. Developed by Spark Unlimited, a company known for... Released in 2008 for Windows, PS3, and 360, the game has an average of 43% on Metacritic. I found a copy for $5, and after completing the game for myself, I don't know what everybody's problem is. People were all like, oh, GTA 4, oh, Gears of War 2. Everyone forgot about Turning Point, dude, or as non-bitches call it, TP. The concept in the game is awesome. Seriously, it is. So in reality, in 1931, Edward Contasano, a mechanic driving through Yonkers, accidentally struck Winston Churchill on a busy December day. Old Winnie just decided to get out of the car and walk around in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Dumbass. Churchill was fine, probably protected by his gut, and went on to limp his way to prominence by leading his nation to help eradicate the fascists. You know, after all the blood, sweat, and tears afforded the world by his brave countrymen, he'd probably be so psyched to see the UK nowadays. Yeah! Anyway, in the story of TP, the car crash instead killed the old lion, and thus he wasn't around to mount an offense against the Germans, leading to an alternate history where, in 1953, the United States was invaded. We fill the boots of our main protagonist, some random construction worker named Dan.
Dan!
Hell yeah, brother. Dan doesn't even blink, dude. Not even a safety harness, because men used to be men. He just runs along this iron scaffolding and kills the first guy that he sees. His wife was probably always nagging him like, Dan, when are you gonna stop jerking off and start killing Nazis? And he's like, alright already, gosh. He rides a crashing lift down a building and just brushes it off, because my boy Dan ain't no Momo. He gets back to smoking the invaders quick like. You know, BJ Blazkowicz had to be commanded to do this kind of stuff. Old Danny boy from the block just starts breaking necks and writing checks. It's a Bronx thing, baby. The concept is kind of like Freedom Fighters, just without the class, style, atmosphere, character and world building, quality, care.
Oh!
But hey, good news. Jimmy Hopkins, alive and well after graduating Bulworth Academy. So the thing about the plot in TP is that it's really thin. You're just Dan.
Dan!
You go around hanging out with actual soldiers, and you do sanctioned missions at their request. And like any old iron worker, Dan, without any training, knows how to operate various foreign and domestic weaponry, as well as explosives. It's a good thing too, because at the end, he goes into the White House with a band of resistance fighters, not the army of course, and assassinates the president, who was a sympathizer for Mr. Final Solution Mustache Leatherman. At this point, Dan is still wearing the outfit he started the game with, because hygiene is for broads. The Germans have super blimps that they want to equip with nukes. By the way, there are about 10,000 Zeppelins, blimps, and dirigibles in TP. The ultimate weapon, as the Hindenburg taught us, a big bag of hot air. With this intelligence, the US decides, instead of sending in the might of the military to counter this apocalyptic problem, just send in Dan the man. If he can't do it, nobody can. Go Dan. Of course, Dan destroys the bombs. However, it's not all roses. He realizes that he can't drop the final nuke into the ocean, and instead, solemnly accepts his fate. Dan CARSON, the man who saved the world. Dan CARSON, because no other character in this game had a name. The gameplay in TP is kind of like a mix of Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, and AIDS. It's an FPS. You run, point, shoot, and do the occasional pipe shimmy like the boys down in Greenwich Village. Oh! With a simple press of the circle button, Dan can snatch up an enemy by the collar. From here, you can perform an instant kill, usually Dan doing a clothesline or a punch. If wrestling is fake, then explain that, pussy. If he's near a ladder or a railing, he can perform an environmental kill instead. If you thought Manhunt 2 or The Punisher were brutal, then you haven't gotten the stomach for the Dan CARSON treatment. There is no impact, and you can't even really see what happens. Whew, thank God. Or just use the bad guys as a human shield. Now thankfully the Germans are wonderful dance partners and they don't struggle. You can also throw grenades around. I'm not sure why they explode like a nuclear warhead, but oh, forget about it. It also helps when you throw one, the Germans freeze up, probably out of fear, and let the explosion take them to the great beer hall in the sky. At various points, Dan has to plant explosives on some heavy equipment. Quick, nobody call EOD, a random construction boy just walked up. You attach wires that match your button color and then cinch them down with the left stick. Flip the switch and kablooey. There are maybe two stealth segments here. You know, Sam Fisher has been real quiet since TP dropped. Then again, Sam Fisher's been real quiet since 2013. But anyway, you should avoid the spotlights from the evil super blimp. And if you get caught, forget about it. Just run away, because it doesn't actually matter. And Dan is agile too. At points, Dan can mantle certain objects like overhead pipes or ledges, and it switches to a third-person view like the Chronicles of Riddick. I know, how could I compare Riddick to a much better game like this? Hey, it's a dirty job, but someone's gotta do it. As far as weapons, you get some American classics, the M1, the Thompson with a drum mag, an M1911, etc. But the German weapons are slightly more evolved versions of what actually existed, and evidently these were based on real concepts or prototypes that may have existed if the Germans didn't, lose. There's an FG-44 instead of a 42, an MP-50 instead of a 44 or a 40, and quite frankly, I actually appreciated the buffed up takes on a few classics. If only the shooting were actually good. I mean bad. I meant bad. Whoa. The shotgun, which I think is a Winchester Model 12, looks okay. I'm a sucker for this weapon in video games, but it's even better when you get to pull the trigger, which rhymes with an Italian's favorite word.
Oh!
Pull is what I meant, which rhymes with full, like after my mother's sauce. Anyway, the shotgun has zero impact. No blood, no ragdoll, and the environments hardly take a scratch. The Vampire Sniper is alright if you like sniping through a Virtual Boy. It kind of reminds me of the Snooper Rifle from Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Kinda. There's a rocket launcher, and with every shot the frames drop to about 3 per second. Cool. Also, quick note, the hitbox around switches, levers, and buttons are about as big as a camel spider's doink, which rules. It's tight to stop the flow of the game to hunt for that single pixel every so often. Oh, and you gotta love the lifelike AI too. They range from standing totally still while you blast them, to camping far, far away and taking pixel-perfect shots on you. Nice. If you die, you get to load a checkpoint from forever ago, and if you're lucky, your game will crash like mine did 3 times. Technical wizards over at Spark. The game is only about 2 hours long. Yeah, apparently it was full priced, and you guys complained about Kane and Lynch too. But boy oh boy, they packed those 2 hours with awesome segments, like the Tower Bridge, a thick metal lattice where you can't see a thing, the random expert AI marksman all of a sudden with the high ground, super blimps flanking you, and hey, why not a few big bubble turrets from the super duper ultra German blimp while we're at it? I definitely wasn't getting pissed. And then we go inside the Zeppelin, where we fight through bathroom-sized hallways, and we shoot at the jumpy, wiggly cardboard cutouts that are supposed to be artificially intelligent enemies, I reckon. So fun! An actual good thing about playing TP is that I was reminded of how good the battery was on the DualShock 3. I didn't even lose a bar the entire time I played. Underrated controller in my opinion. Seriously. So, after you beat the game, you can play the multiplayer. The servers are probably packed, but I didn't have time to try it. Or, you can enter some cheats for when you're itching for another playthrough, and you know you are. Okay, so obviously cheat codes are a common feature, especially back in those days, but then they have a spot where you can input bonus codes. So, and I'm being serious, what you did is you called this hotline and you give them the secret code you got for completing the game, after which they give you more cheat codes that you can enter. The trick is, the hotline costs $2.99 per minute. How long do you think those cheat codes were, and how slow do you think they read them? Spending actual money for Turning Point Fall of Liberty cheat codes is almost as pathetic as defending a game for finally being playable 6 years after launch. You know, I'm talking trash, but meanwhile I'm standing here playing this game. We gave Todd Howard $99 a year for this. Running on the Unreal Engine 3, Turning Point harnesses the full power of the cell. In truth, at least the color palette isn't the same old OD green and muddy poop brown that every Unreal 3 game had. There are some nice warm tones in the game, a lot of reds. You know, there's a funny little logo superimposed in front of it, but we can't be too choosy. There are also some neatish interiors, various homes and such. And honestly, seeing sites like the Chrysler Building toppled over on a street level is pretty rad. I'm a huge fan of stuff like fallen landmarks in fiction, and this was pretty dope. But then you gotta move around, and oh boy. Forget the smooth performance of Gears of War 2 or the wonderful physics of GTA 4. Feast your eyes on single-digit frame rates, screen tearing at literally all times, janky, stuttering animations, and some of the most poorly rendered faces that I've ever seen. The acting in TP is, you know, honestly, I cannot remember anything of it outside of generic people saying things like, "Get to that thing," or "Hold this position." Dan, our hero, doesn't even talk. He just kind of smirks once. The rest of the sound in the game is about as good as the graphics, you feel me? Genuinely impressive, really, is the soundtrack. When I heard the stirring, bombastic music under the sounds of all the muffled, low bitrate chaos and pop gun sound effects, I went, holy cannoli, that sounds really good. It sounded like Michael Giacchino, the composer for several Medal of Honor games, back when those didn't suck ass. But the soundtrack really is awesome, and it does a good job of setting the tone for this large-scale war with the call to arms against nearly impossible odds. And then I looked it up, and holy cannoli, it was Michael Giacchino. No wonder the music was so good. I nearly did a backflip like a big fat guinea pig
from a diving board through a portal
inside of a sauteed polar bear's butthole.
What? The legacy of Turning Point Fall of Liberty. I mean, you watched the video up to this point, right? TP sold about 250,000 copies and has gone down as one of the worst games from this generation of consoles. I do love the concept, and some of the imagery is neat, like a Titanic-sized death blimp mounted to the Tower Bridge and battling in front of the destroyed Chrysler Building. And like I said, the score is genuinely fantastic. It's classic Giacchino. But the rest of the game feels like a rough beta build that Codemasters just kinda pushed out of the door because who cares? Codemasters did something similar with Second Sight. Just, what do you guys need, money? Nah. What, you need time? Nah. Thankfully, in reality, World War II concluded before this kind of trouble came to our shores. The horrific concentration camps were liberated and now stand as a memorial to when madness goes truly unchecked. Thankfully, we've learned from history, and nobody would ignore crimes against humanity any longer. Right? Oh. Well, but... Oh. Nope. Everything is A-okay.
This is the first Oscar and second nomination for Casey Affleck.
Enough!